We're 1 minute after the hour, so we'll just go ahead and get started. So, welcome everybody to Food Systems Fridays. And Food Systems Fridays is organized by the Sustainable Food Systems faculty at Prescott College. My name is Robin Curry, and I'm the director of the Master of Science in Sustainable Food Systems program, which is an online program, intentionally online program, that seeks to support students and their efforts to build more sustainable food systems in their own communities. And today I have a special announcement because we have a new program to add to our portfolio at Prescott College. So we just got word of approval for our Bachelor of Arts and our Bachelor of Science in Sustainable Food Systems. So we are going to be excited to be welcoming students, bachelor level students, both on campus and online in the fall. So very excited about that. But we launched this webinar series, the Food Systems Fridays webinar series, to support all of you in your own communities. And we know that many of you are working in your own communities to transform food systems. And we started this with the onset of COVID because we felt that clearly COVID put a spotlight on existing inequities and exacerbated the inequities that we knew were already there, but it was time for us to pay some more public attention and work to find folks who could help us learn more about policies, practices, and really, what it is that people are doing so that they could show us and help us learn about models of sustainable food systems and communities. And one such person who's joining us today is Sharon Palmer. So welcome, Sharon.
Hi.
Yeah, and before I completely hand the mic over to Sharon, I want to let you know that we'll be airing again in March when we'll be celebrating 1 year. So we had our first Food Systems Fridays episode a year ago. So stay tuned. If you've registered for our webinars, you'll get all the information. So what's in store for our 1 year episode. So looking forward to seeing you in March. I do want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded. We make this webinar available for free via our website for folks who are not able to attend at this specific time. So please understand that when you participate in the chat, you're agreeing to let Prescott College share and distribute that information. So thank you so much. We really do appreciate the ability to do this for those who are not able to be here at this particular time and watch the webinar later. So having said all of that, we still would love to have your participation in the chat. The chat area is a really great community building space, and we invite you to say hello and to provide a brief introduction. Let us know who you are and feel free to say a few words about why you registered for the webinar today. And something special for today, we'd really love for you to share with us what your favorite bean is or your favorite bean variety. So we're okay at the species level or at the varietal level. So we'd love to hear about what your favorite bean is. Please feel free to share email contacts if you're comfortable with that. And please do also enter your questions for Sharon into the chat box or in the Q&A space. So you'll see both options at the bottom of your screen for most of you. So I now invite all of you to learn more about cooking with beans so we can continue to I see a black-eyed peas that caught my attention. Yes, Sharon has a lot of stories about black-eyed peas, but we're here so that we can continue the work on transforming food systems for the long-term provision of healthy food for all as a human right. And so you may be wondering why we are focusing on beans. Well, we have two occasions today. The first occasion is that World Pulses Day was on February 10th. So we're a couple days late, but we're in honor of. And there's a reason why, from a sustainability, diets, and a food systems transformation perspective, that we really would love to focus more attention on the incredible bean, which is the theme of our workshop today. So it's a culinary workshop in celebration of World Pulses Day. And, sustainable diets, that concept is for diets that have low environmental impacts, but play an important role in food and nutrition security. So, clearly climate change means our environment is changing, and our diets have both been drivers of climate change, but can also play a role in mitigating, and adapting to climate change. So our guest, Sharon Palmer, is here to help us understand pulses, their role in healthy diets, and also a healthy planet. So Sharon Palmer is a registered dietitian who is very passionate about plant-based sustainable eating. She's a nutrition expert in plant-based sustainability nutrition. She's also the author of the Plant Powered Diet series, and she has a brand new book that's coming out called California Vegan, that I've pre-ordered. So I've pre-ordered it, Sharon. But she's an editor for Today's Dietitian, and has contributed over 1,000 articles in a variety of publications. And so she's also associate faculty member at Prescott College, and has a new course coming up. Also, it's Pulses Nutrition and a Culinary Workshop. So we invite folks outside of the Prescott College community to join us for that course, and I'll be sharing some information there also. But handing it over to you. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you so much, and happy World Pulses Day, even if we're a couple days late. I'm celebrating today. I'm in my kitchen. I live in Ojai, California, and I'm going to be sharing some of my favorite nutrition tips and cooking tips for pulses, as well as a little background. And then I'm going to be doing a cooking demo. If you want to follow along with me for the cooking demo, I believe the materials were shared in the link that went along with the webinar, yes. And if for some reason you can't find those, you can find the recipes on my blog at sharonpalmer.com, wherever it's the easiest for you to find those. So first of all, why are pulses so great? Well, I mean, they have so many benefits, but really they're sustainable, they're nutritious, and they're economical. Those are some of the top reasons that I recommend pulses. I recommend that people should have them every day in their diets. Right now, the dietary guidelines is recommending at least 3 times per week a serving of pulses. Unfortunately, North Americans are eating about 11 grams per day, per capita per day, which is falling dramatically short. But yet these were foods that were part of traditional diets going back to the beginning of civilizations. They were, part of their original 8 Neolithic founder crops. And I'm sure Robin is going to be sharing a lot of botanical and historical information on pulses today. But they have this rich history in so many of our healthful diet patterns. When we look at these traditional diet patterns from around the world, the Mediterranean diet is the most researched diet pattern. And pulses, beans, lentils, they play a key part in that diet pattern. So humans have relied on these foods for sustenance over the centuries, and with good reason, because they're very nutritious. They're unique in the plant kingdom when it comes to nutrition. I like to say, like, if I got stranded on a desert island, I would hope to have some pulses, because that would get me by for a while. So, they're when they're dried, they last a long time, they're shelf stable, they're economical, and they're really versatile. But when it comes to nutrition, pulses on average have at least 20% of the daily value for fiber, folate, and manganese, at least 10% of the daily value for protein, potassium, iron, magnesium, and copper, and 6 to 8% of the daily value for selenium, zinc. And then on top of that, they have phytochemicals. So you can see what a nutritious food that really is. And research has found benefits for people who do consume pulses regularly. So science has linked these benefits, including lower blood cholesterol levels. And of course, there's the fiber kings. You know, they're so high in fiber. They, you know, are really the leaders in the plant world. And so the fiber is really linked to many of the benefits of pulses. So when we look at blood cholesterol lowering, we know fiber is linked to that, among other attributes. So the fiber is also linked to gut health when we're looking at the microbiome, and there's more interesting research coming out on how the gut microbiome is related to human health overall, even brain health, immune health, you know, so many aspects beyond just digestion. So that's an interesting area of research. Other benefits are weight. So people who consume beans or pulses regularly have a lower body weight. Again, fiber. Fiber is the real kind of a jewel there, because we know that fiber can increase satiety and help people have a healthier weight. Heart disease, hypertension, cancer, diabetes, all of these chronic diseases have been shown to have a lower risk of these with regular consumption of pulses. So the research is very good in this area, and that's why the dietary guidelines continues to recommend that people have at least 3 servings a week. That's something I'm trying to recommend too. And then when it comes to sustainability, pulses just have it all. I mean, they have a low carbon footprint in terms of the energy required to produce them. They have a low water footprint compared to other food groups. Of course, they're a natural fertilizer, and I think Wendy Sue's going to talk about this a little bit, about how they have this ability to fix nitrogen and put it in the soil. So, you know, that there's less reliance on synthetic fertilizers in the agricultural system. And then they're a cover crop too. So they're increasing biodiversity in the agricultural system. And then a really great thing about pulses is that they're grown in a lot of developing nations. So they provide food security in these areas that really need those nutrient-rich crops. And then that economical aspect, you know, 10 cents per serving on average. So it really checks all the boxes for sustainability, which is really great. And I believe quite passionately that we have an opportunity to help people really fall in love with pulses again and shine a light on them because of all of these aspects: nutrition, sustainability, and the fact that they tie into all these traditional diets. I mean, it's just a great story that we can be promoting. So I wanted to share a few of my cooking tips. First of all, I do believe that people are kind of, they have a barrier about pulses because they of the soaking thing. You know, people are in a hurry these days and they don't want to think about having to soak their beans overnight. So that's one area. And I get that consistently. Like people, especially during COVID, I hear from people, they bought beans and then they just are sitting in their pantry because they kind of don't know what to do. They're a little bit intimidated about the whole soaking thing. So, you know, that's one area of education. Now, for me, it's just so easy to just have that practice of before I go to bed, just throw them in a pot, add the water, put a lid on, and then dinner the next day, I drain it and cook the beans. So it's kind of just a little bit of planning if people can kind of learn those little simple things. But there's also the quick soak method. So if people find that they just don't have time or they don't remember to soak their beans, then the quick soak method is basically throwing the beans in a pot, covering them with water, bringing it to a boil, turning off the heat and letting it soak for 1 hour, then draining them, and then you can cook with them. So I find that I do that myself all the time when I forget to soak the beans. It's like oh yeah, I'll just go do that really fast. And then the Instant Pot has really brought a whole new revolution to cooking beans, because with the Instant Pot, it's using pressure cooking, and you can literally cook dried beans that are not soaked in about 30 minutes, depending on the variety of bean. You know, there's a guide at instantpot.com that tells you like the cooking time for every type of bean. You can still pre-soak your beans and use an Instant Pot and then cook them in like 10 or 15 minutes. So it's really interesting that has made it easier to cook with dried beans. And then some of the things that I like to recommend with beans is that they're just so versatile. First of all, soups and stews, or just a pot of cooked beans like my mother would make. My mother grew up in Arkansas, and every day there was a pot of beans simmering on the stove. And it would have been just something simple with a few some herbs from the garden, nothing fancy, maybe a chopped onion in there, but it was just that earthy, rustic cooked beans. But then stews, soups, chilies, curry dishes. And then there are so many different things you can do beyond those traditional recipes, things like bean salads, even baking with beans. Now you can find pulse flours very easily, very nutrient-rich, gluten-free flours. You can bake with it. I have a recipe where I use an entire can of beans in a brownie, black beans. And you can't even tell because it's a chocolate brownie. So, you can even puree them and add them to baked goods, breads, and things like that. So there's just so much you can do with beans. And I wanted to show you some of my favorite beans. I've got a collection, and Robin's going to help me today because she's the master with all of the history and the botany on the beans. But I wanted to start with some of the beans that I collected. I basically try to keep a variety of beans on hand at all times because they have a long shelf life. And then when I find an unusual variety, I buy it. It's like I like to collect them. So I found this in my local farmer's market. It was, maybe Robin can remind me of the name of this one because I've forgotten it. It's the red bean. What was that one, Robin?
Excuse me, as I struggle with my unmute. So,
I forgot. You told me the name of this one.
Yeah, it was the red hidatsa. The red hidatsa.
Hidatsa. I found this from a local farmer. I don't know if you wanted to share a couple tidbits on this bean, Robin.
Yeah, that one I can. So it's believed that particular variety was bred by the Hidatsa tribe in the Dakotas region. So there are multiple. So all of these beans. So for example, I know you've got. Let's see, what else do you have there?
I have these are some heirloom beans, these pink beans. They were called Rancho Gordo, which is the brand, King City Pinks, which, I was telling Robin an interesting story about that, but I don't know if you wanted to share some information on that one.
Yeah, because botanically, for example, those two beans are coming from the same species. So it's the Phaseolus vulgaris. And so those are, maybe you've heard, we in the United States use the common names like pole beans, and then that also covers that kind of that common term that we use for bush beans or bushy beans also. And so those are all under that umbrella of Phaseolus vulgaris. So the pintos, the blacks, the kidneys, the red hidatsas, the pintos also, exactly.
So I've got our pintos.
Yeah, so botanically, they're very interesting, to think that all of those are actually the same species. They're just simply different varieties. So what else do you have up there?
I also have chickpeas. I'm going to be cooking with chickpeas today too, but these are dried chickpeas, which this is one of my favorite. It's really having a moment right now. I feel like chickpeas are responsible for having a renaissance with pulses. So I love it.
Yeah. So chickpeas are different. So they're not a phaseolus. So they're a Caesar or Cicer, depending on your pronunciations. And they're a little more interesting because, for example, the pintos are known to have been developed like in Peru and in that area, but the chickpeas are definitely of Asian origin. So there have been multiple domestications, and I'll try not to geek out too much here because this is what gets me excited. It's like where our food comes from and who the original, founders really of our food was. But there've actually the more current research on the plant genetics of the chickpeas is that there were recent or multiple domestications. So ranging from the Middle East all the way through Western and Central Asia. And some of our ideas about about where our food comes from, and especially our pulses, it's always limited by politics, right? So, for a long time, we had strained relations with the former Soviet Union, for example, so we weren't having the same kind of scientific exchange, or there were different language barriers in the academic literature. So sometimes we have ideas about where the plant foods come from, but they're actually coming from somewhere else. But we know currently about 80% of the world's production of chickpeas are coming from India, and there had been some more production of chickpeas in the United States, so kind of California, Idaho, Montana, Eastern Washington, but that shifted a little bit more into pinto. But anyway, so we'll see if we actually get a shift in US based production back to chickpeas, since it's having its year this year.
Yeah, it's amazing. I have been trying to track how many things I see chickpeas in, and I've seen chickpea butter, like a peanut butter substitute. I've seen chickpea ice cream, of course, pasta. I mean, it is really the kind of cool hip pulse for sure. I also have a whole bunch of lentils. So I'm crazy about black beluga lentils, which are like, I'm not sure, Robin, if the name beluga came from caviar, because they're almost like, they look like little gem like caviar. I was wondering if that's where the name, of course, that's just a name. It's not related to the species or anything, but I just love, they're just these tiny little black lentils, and they're very crisp. They keep up their texture nicely. So if you're making a salad and you want something that has a little bit of that texture, and then the color is gorgeous. I don't know if I also have, traditional green lentils, and then I have red lentils, which I'm crazy about the red lentils because they really keep up that pretty color, kind of that rich orangey color, and they just hold up really well. Just love those. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about lentils.
Well, it looks like our audience is telling us about lentils. So one of our viewers says yes. So I use the black lentils in tacos. And then someone else is saying that beluga, the black lentil, is big in Australia. And then we're also getting a reminder to come back and talk about the aquafaba when we're talking about the
Yes, I will. I will.
Yeah. Yeah, so the lentils are botanically different from, both the, the pintos, the black beans, the kidney beans, the hidatsas. So their botanical genus is Lens. Culinaris is the species name for it. And so, but, you can see there's a lot of varietal differentiation amongst, within the lentils, also within the Lens genus. So, they are centers of origin. We're also looking towards Asia and even the Caucasus region, and so spread into the Mediterranean region. So you'll find that popping up in cooking traditions that are coming from that area. So I tried to pop into the chat. I think I was able to catch up through the lentils, but I've been enjoying exploring foodprint.org. So I know some of our viewers who watch us later don't have the benefit of being able to click into the chat, although we do share that for the first week that we share the video. But they have this environmental lens that they're putting on our food and food production. So we don't have any relationship with them, so there's no endorsement other than I found it really interesting as I was researching for resources for our viewers today for this show. So, and I also quickly want to mention that Dr. Wendy Sue Harper joined us today also. So she's a soil scientist, and of course beans play an important role in maintaining soil fertility on the agricultural side of things. So Wendy Sue, please feel free to pop in also at any time with additional information for us. So back to you.
Hello, everybody. So I also had some split peas. I have yellow split peas. And of course there are green split peas. I don't have those out today. So what could you tell us about the split peas?
Yep, back to the mute challenge. So, so split peas are yet another different botanical grouping. So this is the pisum, and so the split peas are a different subspecies from what we know of as our green peas or our edible peas. So I'll pop that subspecies in there, but it's a Pisum sativum subspecies arvensi. So, they are known as far back as Neolithic times from the Syria and Turkey and the region, that's geographic boundaries are Jordan. But there are also findings from present day Thailand that they found in the archaeological evidence from about over 11,000 years ago of the split peas showing up in the archaeological record also. So there's more research being done, and so there's some ideas that maybe there have been multiple domestications from Georgia in the Caucasus region, but then also coming from what's now the geographic boundaries of Pakistan and Afghanistan, and also India.
That's great. And it's interesting because I have Scandinavian family members, and of course the yellow split pea is one of the most iconic, plant foods. Split pea soup is just a very iconic Scandinavian recipe. So that's why I always have yellow split peas on hand. I also have black beans. And I got this heirloom variety of black beans from a local farmer. But maybe Robin, you could tell us a little bit about the black beans.
Well, botanically, they're that same species. They're that Phaseolus vulgaris.
Okay.
So, it's one of those. So, some of the characteristics that make all of the beans that are, in that, classified as the same genus species is, botanically, they have these really firmly attached, they're firmly attached to the stems, so that the pods of the beans stay connected even as they dry. And then if you're interested in selecting for these varieties botanically, you're looking for ones that that shell stays closed. So if any of you have had experience in growing dry beans, that's really one of those characteristics, because if you're trying to harvest them and if you just touch the little bean pod and it explodes open, then you're digging on the ground to try to find those beans, as opposed to being able to harvest the whole pod off of it and then being able to process it separately. So all of those beans that that have made it to our current day markets with some level of popularity have actually that botanical characteristics in common, that they're more likely to have the pod stay closed.
Okay. And then I also have mung beans, which I thought, I don't have them out of the package, but they're those little pearly, kind of a jade green bean. And I thought this, Robin could share some interesting history on that bean.
Yeah, so I just popped a link into the chat. So Purdue has some wonderful resources about, they call them quote unquote new crops, but they are not new. They may be new, new to us here in the United States and U.S. agricultural markets, but they are not new. But this is, they are botanically distinct from the other plants that you've shown us so far today. So those are Vigna radiata is the scientific name for them. And I did pop a link into that fact sheet from Purdue about the quote unquote new crop, but they're well known in culinary traditions that are specifically coming out of the, the current geographic area that we know of as being India, but then also in the north also.
Okay. And then I also have some white beans. I have two types of white beans. I have the Great Northern. These are canned, and I wanted to highlight that canned is a great alternative for consumers too, because it's easy, very convenient, still shelf stable. So, I like to recommend both types of pulses. So these are great northern beans, and these are European soldier beans, which I would think is that part of that white bean family, Robin.
Yeah, those are all Phaseolus. So
Yeah.
Phaseolus vulgaris. So they are, the incredible bean. They're very versatile and, have high
Okay.
genetic diversity for, that creation and curation that people have done of these different varieties over time. And still,
Yeah.
plant breeding is not static. Yeah.
I have one more bean I want to show you before we start cooking, and that's I have a little story with this bean. I was telling Robin earlier, my mother and father both grew up on a farm, always grew our own food. And when I was traveling to Sweden, where my husband's family is, I picked up these beautiful beans that had a Swedish name, a package of beans, and my mom started planting them every year for like years and years, and then saving the seeds and replanting them. And they're these large, just black with ruby in there, super shiny, very large. And I don't know the name of them, but I have these beans that my mother gave me. I don't know if you can see a little bit closer, but anyway, I was just wondering if anybody could identify this bean. It's really large, black, shiny with kind of red splotches on it. And the flowers are this gorgeous purple flowers. The flowers are beautiful. So
We're trying to crowdsource bean identification.
Oh, yeah.
but
I think go ahead. Do we have any guesses on that?
Not yet, but
yeah.
So I'm looking forward to yep. So we've got Scarlet Runner as a guess.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too.
Yeah, before we when we were
maybe it had a different
webinar,
name in Sweden.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Go ahead, Sharon.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to highlight the fact that heirloom beans have this amazing story, that farmers would plant these beans and these beautiful varieties and save them. And there's so many different varieties. As I was mentioning, I try to collect them. Like I was thinking about orca beans that look like little orca whales. They're little black and white. The eye of the goat bean literally looks like a goat's eye. There's just so many of these amazing beans. And so if you have any favorite ones to share, unusual varieties that you've seen, I'd love to see what you've got going there too. But it's just fun, and the thing that's so great about all these varieties of beans is they have different qualities. So some are fleshy and meaty, and others are crisp and crunchy, and others, the colors can add different qualities. It just makes it a little more fun and interesting to cook with these unusual types of beans. So I think it's a great way to highlight, highlight those beans. So I think I'm going to get started with our cooking demo, and we can finish up, questions later on. But we're going to start with cooking making a classic hummus. It doesn't need to be cooked. It's all going to be done in my food processor today. But I just wanted to highlight a very classic pulse dish, hummus, which is, become a mainstream food in the United States. It's just, so popular to have hummus, and it's just something you can make yourself so easily with just a few ingredients you probably have in your kitchen right now, just a can of chickpeas, a few other ingredients. And I always think that homemade hummus tastes so much better than most anything that you can get in the supermarket. You can control the ingredients. You can literally make it in 10 minutes. And then you can create new ways to do hummus. You can add unusual ingredients, which I'm going to be showing you. So I'm going to start with a classic hummus, and then I'm going to add a few ingredients to show you how you can turn up the volume on the flavor and make something different and interesting. So I've got my food processor out here, and I have 1 can of chickpeas. And I know somebody talked about aquafaba. We're going to talk about that later, so don't let me forget. But what I'm going to do is just basically drain the chickpeas. And I want to save this liquid. Whenever you're making hummus, you want to save that liquid because you might need a little bit of that to get the right texture you're looking for. So I'm just going to throw those chickpeas in my food processor, the drained ones. I'm going to save my liquid. And then I'm just going to throw in here 2 cloves of garlic, and then 2 tablespoons of tahini. Now, tahini is the thing that really gives hummus that really earthy taste that's so good, kind of that nutty taste. And I feel like that's the thing that's missing a lot of times, that people don't use tahini or they're stingy on it. So I use 2 tablespoons of tahini. I'm gonna just use my spoon here. So I've got that in there. And then we're gonna add some lemon juice. So about 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and a lemon on average has about 2 tablespoons of juice. So these are lemons that came from my tree. It's citrus season, so my lemons are really producing. So I'm gonna just squeeze both halves of the lemon in the hummus with the hummus ingredients. So this is a really easy juicer. How many of you guys have one of these? This is one of my favorite kitchen tools. So it's just, you know, a handheld juicer. It doesn't take up a lot of space, and it's just super easy. It's not expensive. So I'm doing both of the lemon halves in here. And then all it is after that is a little olive oil. Gotta get my olive oil. Now this is where you can kind of change your nutritional you know, qualities of the hummus by the amount of olive oil. I try to go kind of moderate with my olive oil. I see some people just, you know, put in a ton of olive oil. I just usually put like 1 to 2 tablespoons. And then I put a little bit of black pepper. And now this is, again, I don't use salt in my cooking. I try to avoid salt at the beginning because, you know, people consume too much sodium. And I like people to get to know the natural tastes of foods without tasting the salt. And you can always season your foods afterwards. You can't take out the salt once you put it in there. So I like to get people to cook it without the salt, taste it, and if it needs it, then add it, or even finish with salt. You get a lot more power from the salt if you finish with just a little bit. So I'm gonna skip the salt right now. And then we're gonna puree this. Now, you use this reserved liquid as you need it. And I'm gonna just put in a little bit, because I know I'm gonna need a little bit, because you want that velvety kind of a texture. You know, when you taste a really good hummus, you have that velvety texture. Now this is gonna be loud, so I have to pardon myself for making a lot of noise. You just wanna blend it until it's nice and smooth. I'm gonna add a little bit more. I'm gonna do it a little bit more. Now you could use a blender instead of a food processor. If you know, whatever you have on hand. I like the effect of a food processor the best. So, you know, you could blend it a little bit more until you get that texture you're looking for. But I want to show you now what you can do with your basic hummus. So here's basic classic hummus, you know, just chickpea hummus. Now you can go crazy and get creative. So, you know, I'm going to be showing you how to do a sun-dried tomato Kalamata olive hummus, but you could do anything you want after you get this basic hummus. While it's in your, you know, food processor, you could put roasted beets in there or carrots. You could do, I had some of my ideas here. Pumpkin, I have a pumpkin hummus. Avocado, put in an avocado. Maybe throw in a jalapeno pepper. Something that you might have in your refrigerator. Or think of all the spices. So you could just throw in like some smoked paprika maybe for that smoky profile, or cilantro or basil. You know, think of all those different flavor profiles that you could add. You can even do a sweet hummus. And what I mean by sweet is like a strawberry hummus with fruit, or a dark chocolate, put cocoa powder in there. So just think about all those things that you can add. But I'm going to take this now to the next level and do Kalamata olive and sun-dried tomatoes. So I have 1/3 cup of Kalamata olives here. You could use a different type of olive. I did drain those because the olives tend to have a lot of liquid and you don't want this to be overly liquid. And then I've got 1/3 cup of sun-dried tomatoes. These are from my garden last year because I had way too many tomatoes, so I sun-dried them. So these are some sun-dried tomatoes, and then a little bit of basil. Now, if you had fresh basil, you could throw that in there. It's out of season right now, so I'm just using just a teaspoon of dried basil, and that's really it. I'm going to create this kind of a Mediterranean profile with those ingredients. And just blend it up a little bit more. Now this could be your decision how creamy you want it, because I actually like this where you can see little pieces of the tomato. I don't want it to be like a smoothie. I like to see some little chunks of those olives and tomatoes. So I'm going to keep it right here. And that's really it. See how easy that was. So literally, it's if you have a can of chickpeas in your pantry and some tahini and a lemon, you know, you always have the olive oil around typically, then you're good to go with something like this, a hummus, a homemade hummus. And it's really good compared to a lot of the things that you might find. So here's my hummus with the olives and the sun-dried tomatoes. I'm going to just put this in a serving dish. And, you know, the great thing about hummus, you know, a lot of times we think of it as a snack, you know, with veggies or whole grain crackers or pita, but it's also great as a spread, a sandwich spread in a, you know, in a pita bread as the filling. So, or even like a dip, like when you're making veggie patties or veggie balls as kind of an accompaniment, or like if you're making a veggie loaf. So, you know, it lasts in the refrigerator for like a week. So it's just a very simple, versatile thing that you can keep on hand. And I feel like whenever I make a batch of hummus, it's gone in like one day. My family will just go crazy. So I've got a little arrangement here. I love food to look beautiful. So I've got some fresh marjoram from my garden. I'm going to drizzle a little olive oil on top. And I also have some edible flowers that I found in my garden this morning. I have a chamomile flower, which they're just so pretty for decorating. They just look like little white daisies. And maybe I'll put a little black pepper for a finish. So then we've got our hummus, and then we can serve it with, I've got some whole grain flatbread here, some veggies, some as accompaniments. So there you go. And this could be like as an appetizer, as I said, it could be a filling for a sandwich or an accompaniment for something like veggie balls or veggie patties. So I also wanted to respond to the question about aquafaba, because here we have our chickpea liquid. And thanks for bringing that up, because I use aquafaba a lot in my cooking. It's basically a plant-based egg replacement. So here we have our liquid left from that can of chickpeas, and that's literally what aquafaba is. It's the liquid from canned beans or the liquid left over from cooking beans. So it could be other beans. It doesn't have to be aquafaba, but aquafaba works really well from the chickpeas because the chickpeas are very mild. They don't have a dark colored liquid. If you're using the liquid from beans, it's darker colored. It might change the result of what you're doing. So basically you can take this liquid and whip it up using an electric mixer, and within minutes it will become like a meringue. It will go all the way to stiff peaks. You can do it to foamy, you can do it to stiff peaks, and you can literally use that as a replacement for eggs in baking or meringues. It's becoming very popular. It's a way of like reducing food waste because you're using everything in the can. It's great for people who have allergies or who are eating completely plant-based diets. So it's also great for avoiding raw eggs. You know, there are some safety issues surrounding eating raw eggs. So this would be an alternative when you make it into the meringue, that you wouldn't have that food safety issue. And this was kind of developed by some food scientists. They were experimenting with this. And the thought is these indigestible carbohydrates in here are those are the things that are providing this property that it's able to whip up and create that texture. So I saw a lot of people making some comments about aquafaba. So does anybody have any other questions?
Yes. I've been typing away. So, but there's also quite a few questions, and so one of them is I think maybe better fielded by Wendy Sue, and so the question was about the role of beans as cover crops, and so the question was, you know, what is a cover crop, and you know, can we speak a little bit more about that? So, Wendy Sue, happy to hand the mic over to you.
Thank you. Cover crops are crops that are grown when the soil is normally bare. They can be grown in northern climates over winter. So they get planted sometime in fall and grow a little bit. And some of them will die over winter, others will survive and plant continue growing in spring. They can be grown in the summer between the cash crops, and they add organic matter to the soil. They can add nitrogen if it's a legume like a bean. um, they can reduce chemical use because of that. They also increase biodiversity by adding another crop into the whole system, where they're very valuable for that. They can provide pollinators food in the form of the nectar the flowers provide. And some legumes also have extra floral nectaries, or places in the plant where they produce nectar that aren't flowers. So they do a lot of good things in a in a in a in a crop rotation.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy Sue. And actually, bean nectar is super sweet. Of course, it varies a little bit by variety, but bees definitely have a preference for everything in the bean family. So I wanted to mention one things is so another set of questions. There was a question about, do beans grow in the wild? And the short answer is, for most of our food plants, is yes. But like many of our food plants, we have our ancestors, and for folks who look like me, not necessarily my ancestors, but ancestors of other people all across the planet, to thank for thousands and thousands of years of plant selection and plant breeding work that they've done. Because what we know for a lot of the legumes specifically is that many of them can have toxic properties to them, and some of them are more or less digestible than others. So I think we've all experienced this, even with the cultivated varieties of beans that are available on the market right now, in terms of the digestibility. And so I wanted to, mention for those who are watching the program later, that I've shared a number of resources for those who are interested in learning more about crop wild relatives. So these are essentially the plants from which the cultivated varieties of food plants that we eat now come from originally. So the organization Bioversity International has been quite active in conserving crop wild relatives. Say that 3 times fast. And then there are a number of research efforts globally, but I wanted to speak just really briefly about, one crop trust. And then maybe some of you have heard about the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. And so these are folks who, it's a global effort to work on collecting and conserving our both our crop wild relatives, but also our current day plant varieties, should disaster strike. And I just do want to point out, there was some chat in here. I do want to just point out that there's a little bit of there's some ethical issues involved in all of these discussions about crop wild relatives and the origins of our plant domesticates, because clearly that is something that some plants were domesticated, and people continue to act on those plants and select characteristics for those plants. And so it's my opinion that we should be looking at them just as we look at any other cultural artifact and cultural creation. And we have to be really really careful when we are then claiming them as, something new that we found. And then, it even gets into, patenting those varieties and then selling those varieties, and really stealing traditional ecological knowledge is one way of looking at it. So I just wanted to mention that there's that side of this conversation also. But the original question was, do beans grow wild? Yes. Why, yes, they do. So, pardon me. We welcome any additional questions, and and thank you for your assistance. If there was a question that I missed in the chat, and you'd like to bring it back up to the top.
Robin,
go ahead.
I was
Sharon.
going to just mention, you brought up a really good point, a lot of great points, and I thank you for bringing those up. But one of the things that you touched on is the indigestible qualities of pulses, and that's a very hot topic in the nutrition world right now. You're going to see tons of articles saying you shouldn't eat pulses because of anti-nutrients and lectins, and there's a lot of misinformation out there right now. There are books being written, there are health gurus saying that people should never eat them, they were never fit for human consumption. It's a very big topic right now, and it's like one of the big myth busters that I have to do is on pulses. And I just wanted to bring up the point that many of these anti-nutrients and these common pulses that we talked about today are mostly neutralized during the soaking and cooking process. And I don't know if you had something to add on that, because people are literally avoiding them because they think that they're toxic.
No, I don't have anything to add to that other than, we have a comment from one of our participants is, pros and cons, listen to your body. Everyone is different, but, it's also going to be interesting to see how the literature evolves in that area. But from a sustainable diets perspective, in terms of climate impact and impact on soil fertility of the beans, I find myself being like, say it ain't so, and so watching the literature carefully to understand. But that's very interesting. So how is that debate unfolding? Is it?
Well, it's not, they're basing a lot of these citations on raw, uncooked legumes and animal research, that shows that raw, uncooked legumes pulses are, cause problems. And of course they do. These are foods that we know we have to cook. And so the research is showing that they're largely, they largely destroyed by the time they're cooked. So that's the moral of the story is that these benefits exist. There's research on the health benefits. So I think that's just a matter of constantly providing the research. And we do need more research. Like we need research on cooking times, what temperature, there's not enough research. Like, I've had questions, if you slow cook beans, do they ever get high enough to destroy the anti-nutrients? And we honestly don't have the temperatures on some of these beans. So anyway, there's a lot of interesting debate on that. But overall, we know that they're linked with health benefits, and we know that these are limited when we cook them. And another thing that I get all the time is, the digestibility issues, the GI things that come along with eating pulses. And research does show that a lot of it is related to fiber. Americans eat a dismal amount of fiber. So anytime you all of a sudden just, increase the fiber to, like 10 times and 10 grams more per day, people will get some negative impacts from that. But research shows that you can become accustomed to increases in fiber eventually. Like if you gradually increase the fiber, you will become used to it. And that's what I usually recommend for people if they have, some fears about some of the GI issues. And then the other thing I recommend is if you're going to start eating a more high fiber plant-based diet, go easy, like maybe on that meal that you're eating beans, don't have the whole grains and the broccoli and the kale and everything else. Just gradually bring up the fiber in the whole diet, drink lots of water, and you'll power through when you get used to it. I mean, I eat a 100% plant-based diet, and some days I'm eating 70 grams of fiber per day, which is astonishing. But I've just been eating this way for so long, and I'm used to it. So interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for filling in a little bit more on the research. We do have a question from the audience, and so I'm trying something new after a year of this. It's time to learn some more. But so I am going to call on someone who raised their hand, and they'll be asking their question. So, okay, so Lacey, let me see if I can unmute you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, wonderful.
I'm not sure how to turn on my camera, but since you can hear me, I'll just go ahead and ask my question, which is, really, it was already somewhat answered, but my mom is someone who's very concerned about lectins in beans and completely avoids beans, although I finally her recently to incorporate, she's starting to eat them again a little bit. If they're pressure cooked, that's what she has heard or read, that if they're I think it was pressure cooked, then that kills half of the lectins. And I was just wondering if there is a certain cooking method that's best, and if certain beans are have fewer lectins than others, or if really it's just not something to worry about. And where she's getting all this information from is a book called The Plant Paradox.
Yep. I'm very familiar with that one.
Yeah.
It's like the antithesis of the research. I mean, it's literally recommending people to not eat beans, whole grains, many vegetables. It's really, it's not something that I recommend. Yeah. But yeah, so there is research that shows you don't have to pressure cook to achieve the temperatures to destroy, those lectins and anti-nutrients. And there's lectins in all sorts of plant foods, not just beans, although beans are very high. And some beans are higher, like kidney beans are higher than some other beans. But, I just point people back to the research that particular health guru and book is very popular. And that's where a lot of this is coming from, where people are afraid to eat beans. Yeah. But I just refer people back to the research that shows all the health benefits, and that these have been part of traditional diets. I mean, the Mediterranean diet is one of the, the most well-researched diet pattern we have. Pulses are a key part of that diet. So, and we know that research shows, we have studies that show when you substitute beans for beef, the health benefits and the sustainability benefits. So I just keep trying to educate people and provide the research to show that it's a helpful thing. I think the fact that some people have GI issues with beans, and that kind of backs up that fear they might have. So I try to help people with that too, because there is that fear. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Oh yeah, and I was just wondering if you could add, I wasn't able to, I joined the webinar late. So can you reiterate, if you haven't already said it, the research that you're referring to? Like, is there a website or a book to check out?
Well, in terms of the lectins and the anti-nutrients, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
So I have written a couple things on that. You could Google, if you just Google my name and the word anti-nutrients, and I have referenced the studies for that. That might be, I know that I'm the nutrition editor at Today's Dietitian. We've covered it a couple of times and pulled up the research. We have a new article that's coming out in a couple months that really targets this, really gets into it. And it won't come out for, I believe it's coming out in April. And it's going to be a great resource with all the research on, that we have on these anti-nutrients and lectins. So, but, I can get you more information. I can get your email or something. Robin can give it to me. I can share more information, but I have tried to collect a lot of those resources.
Okay, thank you.
It's a great question.
Yeah, thank you, Lacey. And then some of our participants have been really wonderful about sharing resources that they know of in the chats also. So one of our
Great.
participants is suggesting and directing folks to nutritionfacts.org and about discussion around lectins that is happening there. And they say that has some nice science-based food presentations on that site. So send you in that direction. And then there was a question in the chat about if there are any sources that could direct people to information about beans that have more or less anti-nutrients in them, on a varietal basis. And maybe I'll take the first half of that and then hand it over to you, Sharon, because one of the we just suffer in general from a lack of research on these quote unquote heirloom varieties. We have lost, there's lots of different numbers out there, but if you look at like plant seed catalogs from the early 1900s and you look at today, as some folks have done, some estimates are that we have lost over 90% of our varietal diversity. And so what happens is we're just not in the scientific realm. We're not doing the research on them. We're not grinding them up, and testing, everything that was on Sharon's, cutting board at the beginning of today's webinar. I would be surprised if we could find even varietal level nutrition information for them, let alone, profiles for the anti-nutrients. And then we also know that anti-nutrients in our body are affected by what we eat with it. And so our body's absorptive ability, or even, what those anti-nutrients are able to bind with if we're eating the bean in addition to something else, varies significantly. So with that, I can tell you botanically and from a science perspective, looking at varietal diversity, terribly, horribly understudied. And then I'll hand it back over to Sharon in just one quick second to speak more about the nutrition. I want to acknowledge that some of our viewers need to step away because we're at the top of the hour. So thank you very much for joining us today. And if you want to listen to the telltale end, you can catch it on the recording. So thanks for being with us if you need to step away, but otherwise, we'll stick with it for a few more minutes here. So, I'll hand that question, to you, Sharon, about, what sources have less anti-nutrients, and maybe it's the heirloom varieties.
Yeah, I will just echo what you said. There's not enough research on this. When I've written on this, I've just dug into the research. This new article that's coming out, Today's Dietitian, we looked at everything we could find, and I've never seen, at least I am not aware of anything that has like a guide that says how much per variety. And I don't think we know when it comes to all of these varieties of pulses. So interestingly, though, some new research I was reading, and Robin kind of talked a little bit about this, is some of the enzymes that go along with those anti-nutrients, that modify them, are in some of the foods we eat. So it's like the whole diet part of it, when you're eating this diet. So actually some of the fresh foods have some of those enzymes for some of these anti-nutrients. So when you have fresh food and in combination with cooked food, some of those are coming along. And again, we hardly know anything about that. We should learn more. I've been trying to encourage more people, because I think some of these studies would be so simple, just laboratory analyses of some of these things. So we do need more research in this area.
Yeah, and I think maybe, not to end on a depressing note, maybe that's a call for research, right? An acknowledgement that, we still have work to do. And, I think that, you bring up a really important theme that, you know, is a great closing theme, is that it's, even though we're here celebrating World Pulses Day, ultimately it's about the diets, and it's about the food combinations, and it's about thinking about, you know, back to that idea of sustainable diets. It's not the single isolated food item. It's, you know, how we're eating it, when we're eating it, and even with whom we're eating it in terms of well-being point of view. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Wendy Sue, for popping in with our soil science facts. Really appreciate your perspectives. And Sharon, as always, I always learn more information from you every time that we have the opportunity to work together. And I really want to thank all of our participants today. The chat was really amazing. I learned a whole bunch of new stuff, and I'm sorry I couldn't keep up with all of the great suggestions, especially from our RDs. You know, we love our RDs around here. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you in March as we celebrate 1 year of Food Systems Fridays. Thank you.
Bye.